effort from Alex Cobb that has us. And, Luke, I've said there's a puzzle here all the way around for this Orioles team. I don't know that it's ever going to get solved, but certainly when Alex Cobb came to town, I thought – I didn't want to say they became a contender. I thought they became a relevant team. I was really wrong.
Yeah, and I'll say this right off the bat. My concern over him pales in comparison to about 15 other issues right now with this club. Topping the list, them playing 6-18 baseball and essentially being out of it already. But that said, 3 starts into this thing and understanding that he didn't sign until late March and didn't pitch in any spring training games and has been expedited here as far as trying to get up to speed. You'd like to see more progress than you're seeing. And, if you watched Wednesday night start, after the first inning, he did get into a little bit of a groove in the second, third, and fourth. Gave up a couple hits, but looked like he was making some progress. But then the third time through the order came around in the 5th inning, and it went downhill very, very quickly. The results aside, I still don't like the fact that he's not getting any strikeouts. He's not missing any bats. I think he had 3 swinging strikes over the course of his entire outing, which was 77 pitches. You'd like to see more than that. And Cobb's not, he's never been a huge strikeout pitcher, especially since having Tommy John surgery, although he did miss more bats as last year went on. You're still not seeing nearly enough progress here beyond stating the obvious that he has a 13 ERA right now. I mean, I'm trying to dig deeper and look at what we're actually seeing beyond just the finished product, which hasn't been even competitive when you look at the number of runs given up, the number of hits given up compared to innings pitched. But you're just not seeing those peripheral signs that, okay, he's gotten knocked around, but he struck some people out. He's missed some bats. Just not seeing that. So I'm still not panicking by any stretch of the imagination, but you look at what Jake Arrieta's done, for example, in Philadelphia, and look, Cobb's not Jake Arrieta and never has been as far as Arrieta at his peak in Chicago. But at the same time, he's trying to get up to speed, and this team is circling the drain if it hasn't already gone down the drain. 12 games under 500 in late April already, but it's just feeling like they brought him in, and he's not even going to have a chance to make a positive contribution on this team, because by the time he does get up to speed, and I expect him to get up to speed, they're already going to be long out of this thing.
Well, and it really feels like as much as we get together and we're going to slap our gums, I don't know that they can become relevant at this point, right? Like, it would take a lot of winning at this point to get the 500, more than they probably have on a start basis. But piece by piece, the one thing I guess Buck can do, and the one thing that they sit around as an organization every night when you're 6-18, is try to figure out how every guy gets better tonight. And you and I will be measuring that all year long, and I don't know whether it matters whether Chris Davis bats well or doesn't bat well. He's getting paid either way, and the team won't be relevant. But it's been a long time. I mean, long time since you and I have gotten together, and they really have no chance. And we spent years and years, over a decade where they never had a chance. And to go back to that place again and to see how empty the stadium is early on, and to see that no one's talking about the team, and probably no one's going to talk about the team at 6-18 because they've buried themselves so far that night after night, it does remind me a little bit of 1988, where, as Phil Jackman once said to me, we were driving to a Caps playoff game during that run. Yeah, 0-12's clever. It's cute. Wait till they're 6-29, and then all of a sudden it's not cute anymore. And losing, there's no end to it when it gets like this. And they certainly have some starters they're going to send to the Hill where it's going to be very hard for them to win on nights if they're really going to send Chris Tillman to the post 26 times this year. But the nights when Cobb pitches, I do have my eyes up. And obviously on nights when Bundy pitches, you think they can win.
Yeah, and to the point you just made, what's crazy about this, and look, Chris Tillman's not going to get 26 starts. I mean, he'll be gone. Assuming we don't see any kind of meaningful improvement, he's going to be gone at some point here in the not too distant future. The question will be who makes those starts. Is it David Hess? Is it Hunter Harvey? Is it some kind of a committee? I really don't see them continuing to go down that path much longer with him if he's not going to make any meaningful improvement. But to the point that you made, it was crazy in the ninth inning. And you know this, having covered baseball for a number of years, but whenever there's a potential pinch hitter that's stepping up to bat for whoever's in the on-deck circle, the PA announcer doesn't make an announcement, but they make an announcement in the press box. And this really just resonated with me. The announcement was, Luis Sardinas is on deck to hit for Jace Peterson.
Right.
And you're
like,
that.
what difference does it make? Right.
When you hear that, it's just, it was, for whatever reason, and look, I kind of checked out. I was writing about the draft. I was writing about the Ravens, this nonsense about the possibility of them drafting a quarterback. So I was kind of half paying attention to the final 3 or 4 innings. But hearing that, it was just jarring because I was just thinking, first of all, Jace Peterson's our second baseman right now. And look, he had a 2-run double. I think he actually is a much better option as a utility player than any of these other guys that they've thrown out there at this point in time. But to hear...
And he got a hit.
to hear Luis Sardinas on deck to hit for him, it was just something that really rang in my head like, my goodness. It's the
no wonder you're not winning.
It's the final week of April, and that's just something that they put out there. I mean, they've been playing guys like Vielma or Sardinas or Danny Valencia standing at third base, a guy who has no business playing third base on a regular basis, despite the fact that he's a pretty accomplished platoon guy against left-handed pitching. But it really speaks to how quickly, how rapidly this thing has gotten out of hand on a number of levels. And look, some of it's been out of their control. We talked about it. They have played a tough schedule. That has been part of this. They have had injuries. That has been part of this. But that said, that still doesn't explain away 6-18. I mean, you can talk about a tough schedule, and I'll hear you if the Orioles are 10-14 right now, where you'd say, okay, they're off to a bad start, but they're a 5-game winning streak away from being fine. But when you're 6-18 and you have the worst run differential in the American League, and you entered the day last in runs scored per game, and there's so little you can point to right now that's remotely a positive. I mean, beyond Dylan Bundy, who's been terrific, beyond Manny Machado, who, if nothing else, has helped his trade value as much as it can be helped at this late stage. But beyond that, what do you point to as something that's even remotely interesting? Okay, Chance Sisco, he had a home run on Wednesday night. I think the way that he's thrown the ball has been encouraging as far as his prospects for being a major league catcher, and that was certainly a big question about him, and will continue to be. Doesn't mean we've found that answer out, but you go down the list, there's very little to point to that you say, yeah, that's something you like. I mean, okay, Trey Mancini's had an okay start to the season. He hasn't been terrific, but he's been solid. Sisco, I already mentioned Machado, but go down the list. I mean, Adam Jones hasn't hit for the most part, although did have a couple hits. And
are they going to trade him, dude?
Do I trade? I mean, I think. Well, first of all, he's a 10-5 guy, so
he'll have to pick where he goes. But
sure.
I would think that's something that's never been. We talked about trading Machado for 3 years.
Yeah.
We never talk about trading the great Adam Jones. Somebody will want him in July, right?
I would think so, and I think to me that's got to be a conversation you have. And if nothing else, even if you're looking to extend him because of what he's meant to the organization, because he's a leader, because you think he still has some decent baseball left. And look, I know he's off to a slow start. By no means am I ready to say Adam Jones is finished or anything crazy like that. Now, I do think you have to move him off center field, and I think that would be part of that discussion as well. But by no means would I say no. I unequivocally wouldn't trade Adam Jones. I think that'd be a mistake because, to me, you explore your options there. I mean, if there's a team that is looking for someone of his ilk, someone with some experience, someone who's played it up at a really consistent level for a long time, yeah, I think everything has to be on the table at this point in time. I mean, there are very few players that I would point to as untouchables right now. but just with where this team is, and I'm not even talking about guys that are going to be free agents at the end of the year. I'd go beyond that, and I'm not saying I'd just have a complete fire sale and get rid of every single guy, but I think when you're in this position that they're in, where even if things go well with some of these positional prospects that they have and some of these pitching prospects that they have that are still a little ways away, what are you looking at? 3 years maybe for them being competitive again? And that's if Cedric Mullins is a real thing, and that's if Austin Hayes is a real thing, and that's if Chance Sisco ends up being a real thing, and that's if Hunter Harvey continues to show progress and gets to the major leagues sooner rather than later, and that's if DL Hall is the next Dylan Bundy.
You're going pretty deep down the rack here.
That's not a.
But that's where they are. That's what they have to be thinking about, because they're not thinking about winning with Chris Tillman and Darren O'Day right now as an organization.
Sure. And look, I'm not naming guys that are non-prospects there, but I'm also acknowledging that a lot would have to go well, and that would also assume you'd be clearing some payroll, and in the next couple of years you could be bringing in some free agents when it looks like you're scooting back, trending in the right direction again. But until that happens, I think you need to be open to just about anything. And I think as much as you want to be sentimental about certain individuals like an Adam Jones, I think back to the last contract the Orioles gave Brian Roberts and how disastrous that was. And I'm not saying Jones would be a repeat of that, but I'm also not going to overpay and go nuts trying to extend Adam Jones, but just because he's meant a lot to the ball club. So, and winning matters to him. So whether it's talking about what he envisions beyond this year for himself and his family, and what he wants out of the rest of this year, I think that's a conversation that you'd have to have, and I would not be opposed to trading Adam Jones whatsoever in that circumstance.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to being the best at everything they do. Every person at Howard Bank uniquely empowered to help you get out, see a new location down there. They're all over the place now. Look around for the Howard Bank near you. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast with the Kona Blend coffee in the cup each and every morning, and the delicious, world-famous fried chicken and Western fries in the afternoon. Make sure you're using the Rofo app when you're gassing up. It'll save you dough. You load up those points, you'll be getting your coffee and your Western fries for free in no time. Also, the Maryland Jockey Club, Cure the Winter Blues, get down to Laurel this weekend or next weekend. The Kentucky Derby running next week. My wife and I will be down at Laurel for that. Then, of course, the meet moves to Pimlico. We'll have the Pink Festival on Friday the 18th in the running of the Black Eyed Susan, as well as on the 19th, the Preakness Stakes, which may include Bob Baffert and Justify. We'll be keeping an eye on that. All of our WNST coverage comes to you in one nice little bow and package at 7 a.m. It is the WNST morning newspaper. It's all powered up by Planet Fitness. It also has the aforementioned Laurel entries involved in that. Make sure you sign up online at WNST.net. Moving from the baseball disaster to the National Football League draft this evening, Luke, you are done with baseball, right? You don't want to belabor this. We can bitch more on Friday or Monday, and they'll be 8-23, and then they'll be 11-28, and we'll be able to look at all of that in the coming weeks, right?
Yeah, we have 5+ months to go. We have 3 months to go until the trade deadline.
Does that occur to you in the 7th inning when they're losing and there's nobody in the stands and it's raining and it's April, that you're like, I'm going to be doing this in July and August?
Yeah, sure. The first year I covered the ball club was 2010, where they got off to a 2-16 start.
That was your fault.
This is almost identical to that, but the problem was, even then, even getting off to that lousy start, there was still a sense of they were, even if it wasn't going to happen that year, they were still trending upward from a standpoint of they had Matt Wieters and they had Adam Jones, who was young at the time, and they still had Nick Markakis, and they had the cavalry that was going to be coming, and, well, we know how some of that turned out.
Worked out for the Cubs.
But the general point of it was they were 2 years away from being a really relevant team and contending again and playing some fun baseball. This time around, that light at the end of the tunnel certainly isn't there. And even with some of the names that I mentioned that are in the minor leagues right now that could help them, it feels a ways away. And
can I interrupt you for 1 second on that note and just say I never thought they would get good. Like, I'm being honest with you. So back when you covered the team in 10, you can talk about Arrieta, Matt, you can talk about any of those guys you want. I never thought that they would. I never thought you and I would get on a plane and go to Kansas City for an ALCS. So for that, honest to God, they've already over-delivered for me. They've made the playoffs a handful of times. They played relevant games. They had a chance to win in New York. I think the modern era of baseball fan is much more in tune with they'll be back. They'll, 2 years from now, they'll retool, they'll restock, and maybe they'll be the Browns and never come back. And certainly the road, ahead for John Angelos, for the family, with the old man in failing health, with whatever his fate is going to be, and the team being sold. You can't really look at it right this minute and say, well, they'll be back and they'll be better again sometime. But I'll be honest with you, dude, when they were losing every year, and I was doing the walkout, and he couldn't hire anyone, I never, ever thought they would win. I wonder what the current fan base thinks of that, because I think the current fan base believes, well, yeah, next year, year after, at some point during the Chance Cisco era here, they'll win 92 games. I don't know. It's hard to do. I think they benefit from the current fan base having some belief that they can win. I don't know that in 2010 any of us really ever thought they would ever win. I mean, I'm just being honest with you, but they do benefit from the fact that there could be hope, because there's been hope recently, right? They didn't have that in 2010. They didn't have any of that to build on then,
Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong. I mean, in 2010, I wasn't convinced that they were going to win a division 4 years later or win 93 games 2 years later.
I would have bet anything that would have never have happened, that Angelos could have never had that happen.
But if you were looking at that and looking at their farm system and looking at some of the very early draft picks that they had, like Wieters at that point, and what you thought Brian Mattis was going to be, and go down the list, and then obviously Machado in 10 and Bundy the year after that, it wasn't impossible to think they weren't going to get better, but sure. Yeah, I mean, as far as them getting to a point where, they had a 5-year stretch where they were the winningest team in the American League in the regular season, yeah, I mean, it was difficult to envision that because it hadn't happened in such a long time. And, I think in baseball in general, anyone who follows the game, yeah, I mean, teams are going to have peaks and valleys, and they're going to have periods of time where they're not going to win as much, and they're going to have periods of time where they're prosperous. I think they'll win again, but is it going to be 2019? Nope. Probably not. Is it going to be 2020? Nope, probably not. We'll see about 2021 and 2022 and 2023.
All right, to football we go. You buying the Lamar Jackson? You called it nonsense. I call it gamesmanship. I don't think there's any chance they're drafting Lamar Jackson, but it would make for a hell of a Coons 4 text this evening, now wouldn't it?
It really would, and I would say, when I say nonsense, I think it's more so if that would be the thinking of the organization. Here's what I'll say. Any run-of-the-mill reporter in any town or any person that fancies themselves as a draft enthusiast who can have a mock draft, and my goodness, there are hundreds of them, maybe thousands of them circulating the Internet as we speak. Anyone can connect the dots and say, okay, well, Joe Flacco hasn't played well for the Ravens. Lamar Jackson is the fourth or fifth best quarterback in this draft. Consensus as far as rankings, regardless of what you think his potential might be. Maybe there's a match there. But when I see Mike Mayock, when I see Albert Breer mocking Lamar Jackson to the Ravens, that makes me take a little bit of pause, because we're not talking about individuals who are just pulling that out of thin air. I mean, Albert Breer is well-connected and has reported Ravens news over the years, including news about Eric DaCosta with teams being interested in him. So, you connect the dots there, maybe who he might be getting his information from. Mike Mayock is well-sourced in this league, in addition to being a really good talent evaluator as far as doing his thing on the NFL Network. I really enjoy his work. So when I see individuals like that talking about Lamar Jackson to the Ravens, that tells me at the very least the Ravens are portraying that they're very interested in Lamar Jackson, and they did reportedly host him for a pre-draft visit, one of their official visits. So from that standpoint, I still am going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And Steve Bisciotti, who said famously now nearly 3 months ago that they have bigger fish to fry. They have bigger concerns to address. But that said, if, and a lot of people have talked about this warm and fuzzy narrative of Ozzie Newsome picking a franchise, the quarterback of the future on his way out. To me, that would sum up this disappointing finish to the Ozzie Newsome era, because you're telling me that Joe Flacco, who, look, let's be very clear, he hasn't performed at a level that you'd like. He's underperformed. I'm cool with that. I'm not a Joe Flacco apologist. I've been critical of Joe plenty of times over the last
Joe Flacco's not a Joe Flacco apologist.
Sure. But that said, you look at Over the Cap put out a tweet on Wednesday night. The least invested in their offense, the teams that have spent the least non-quarterbacks on the offensive side of the ball, guess who's right at the top of the list as far as being as cheap on the offensive side of the ball as anyone in the NFL? The Baltimore Ravens. Non-quarterback money invested in the offense, they're 32nd out of 32 teams. Well, okay, what about the draft? Well, you're going to hear me recite now for probably the 200th time over the last year that of the last 17 players that the Ravens have taken in rounds 1, 2, and 3, 4 have been offensive players. So you're telling me that you're going to draft the quarterback of the future. And this isn't an anti-Lamar Jackson position whatsoever. We could be saying the same thing about Josh Allen or Josh Rosen or Baker Mayfield or any quarterback that would hypothetically fall to an area where the Ravens could potentially draft them. You're telling me that a guy that won you a Super Bowl, that you have done such a poor job of building around over the last 5 years, and I said it, poor, when you look at the dollar store signings and day 3 draft picks.
37-year-old wide receivers.
That they've tried to patchwork an offense with around him over the last 5 years. And then you're going to take another quarterback and say, well, Joe Flacco was the problem. I call phooey on that. And to me, that would really, instead of that leaving, Ozzie Newsome's final legacy, that would seal the really disappointing end to what was otherwise an awesome legacy. And I want to make very clear, I think Ozzie Newsome is a Hall of Fame general manager. 2 Super Bowls, all the playoff appearances over a 2-decade period of time. That's something to be said, and that's not something to overlook. But you're telling me the Ravens are going to throw Joe Flacco off the boat while doing such a dismal job of building around him the last 5 years? That rubs me the wrong way, and it really tells me then that, well, they're not really putting their best foot forward for 2018, and you're telling me then that you're done with Joe Flacco, and they would spin it, but this is just kind of a preemptive strike if they do take a quarterback. And again, I don't expect them to do that. That's not going to be something that, to me, that really paints them in a positive light from a standpoint of, you've given Joe Flacco less to work with than maybe any quarterback in the NFL over the last 5 years. And look, I get it. He's been highly paid. But at the same time, you've asked him to do less or to do more with less than just about any other quarterback. That bugs me. Put a first-round pick into the offense. Put a couple more meaningful draft picks into the offense. You've added 3 wide receivers. You've hired a quarterbacks coach. Guess what? You do all those things, and Joe comes out and still it ranks near the bottom statistically of quarterbacks in the NFL. Then a year from now, I'm all in on saying it's time to move on. But I think you need to finish what you've started already with changing the wide receiver room, bringing in a quarterbacks coach, finish the job here, and invest some meaningful draft capital into the offense other than quarterback, and then we'll see what happens. And if Joe shows no meaningful improvement when you've made all those changes, then you know what? It might be time then. That I haven't even touched on the fact that you have a coaching staff fighting for their jobs this year in win-now mode, and you draft Lamar Jackson, probably not going to make a meaningful impact in 2018. And, the whole point of having a rookie quarterback, drafting a quarterback, is that you benefit from a financial standpoint, the salary cap flexibility that you gain. Well, you will have wasted year 1 of Lamar Jackson, and then next year there's $16 million in dead money with Joe Flacco. And even if you make him a post-June 1st, then you've taken that flexibility out of the free agency signing period. So even if you do that, and even if Lamar Jackson ends up being really good, and again, I'm not anti-Lamar Jackson. This isn't about him. This is about where this organization stands right now. You will have essentially wasted the first half of that rookie contract. Does that really sound like good value on bringing in drafting your next quarterback? The timing's just off here, and I'm still not buying it. And that being said, I don't expect them to take a quarterback in the first round, and this will all be a moot point, but I just had to throw it out there.
Well, from a gamesmanship standpoint, to make that pick about value when Belichick's sitting behind you with a couple of picks and a bunch of teams that could use a quarterback more than you want to make that attractive, but it sure seems like they spent a lot of time making him attractive somehow, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of smoke there. That's all I'll say, and again, and our own Coach Billick said it perfectly. Nobody knows anything. He put that he said that before, but he put that tweet out there on Wednesday morning, and I'll just remind everyone of that and remind myself of that, even though we're continuing to see the Lamar Jackson to the Ravens. And again, making very clear, I like Lamar Jackson. I actually think he can be a really good quarterback, but this isn't a situation like the Giants who are picking second overall. Joe Flacco's not 39 or 40 years old like Tom Brady. Let's give this thing one more year by making a real effort to draft some offensive players. You've brought in 3 new receivers. You have a new quarterbacks coach. Let's see. And if it's much of the same from Flacco, I'll be the first one saying at the end of the season that, I think it might be time to move on.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. All of our coverage brought to you by the Baltimore Brigade. They're going to play on Saturday at 3 o'clock against the Albany Empire at the Royal Farms Arena. Then Ron Jaworski brings his Philadelphia Soul down here next Friday night, May 4th at the Royal Farms Arena. Learn more at BaltimoreBrigade.com as well as at the Monumental Sports app. Download that. You can watch the games. Also, don't forget, this evening at the Modell Lyric, Britt Floyd playing the music of Pink Floyd. Luke would love to be there, but he's covering the draft. We're watching the ball game. Oh, by the way, the Caps are playing game 1 against the Penguins as well. A very, very active night, but if you love Pink Floyd, tonight is your night down at the Modell Lyric. Don't forget Jackson Brown next Thursday night, and of course, William Shatner coming next month. All sorts of great shows there. Go to Modell-Lyric.com to learn more. Also, shout out to our friends at Costas Inn. Good enough for the Today Show. Good enough for my mom. The fat crabs, the cold beer. Don't forget, they got pit beef down there in the afternoons as well. The legend continues. Go see them at CostasInn.com. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And, of course, the nanosecond the Ravens make that pick of Lamar Jackson or not, you'll get it first on the WNST text service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here getting you ready for the draft today. Oh, on the weekend, we got hockey, we got draft, we got more draft, we got indoor football, we got outdoor football, we got a bad baseball team, and the NBA playoffs. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.